This Fed Gov Today program is sponsored by CGI Federal. On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, a data revolution in the making at the Treasury Department, the modernization mission to fulfill the PMA, and the Navy's all-in on autonomy. Welcome to Fed Gov Today in Washington, D.C., on YouTube, and around the world on the American Forces Network. I'm Francis Rose. The federal government's about a year into Phase 2 of the implementation of the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act of 2018. One of the focuses of Phase 2 is meeting the law's requirements around agency data. David Ashley's the acting chief data officer at the Treasury Department. David, welcome. Thanks for joining me. It's great to have you here. You write about 5 points around data that kind of map out the way that the agency's going: governance, literacy, sharing, maturity, and cataloging. How did you and your colleagues decide those were the 5 things you wanted to focus on?
Well, Francis, thank you for having me. I appreciate being here. Well, the Evidence Act came out in 2018, signed really in January 2019. The second phase came out about a year or so ago, and really one of the key elements of that is governance. And governance is a big sort of umbrella term, and under that we've decided things like cataloging are very important. There's a new cataloging rule coming out to do at the end of this year. Data catalog, that's really where we identify all our data assets throughout the entire department. Treasury is a large federated organization of 100,000 folks and about 10 bureaus, so it's a pretty big organization. So the data cataloging effort is a very important piece of understanding what do we have, first of all, what data do we have and where is it kept. So data cataloging is a very important piece of that. Data maturity, trying to understand where we are in that data maturity life cycle. We're now moving a lot more into thinking about how to use AI, and that's another big piece of data maturity. We've completed a data maturity assessment of the bureaus. Each bureau completed that assessment, and we're reporting those out. So that's a big part of kind of understanding the where we are before we understand where we're going to go. And so the data maturity is very important. And data literacy has been a significant lift for the agency to better understand what people know and don't know. And so we've launched a data literacy campaign throughout the department. We've had great response so far from all the bureaus. So really trying to elevate the understanding in data literacy as well. All these things really together comprise what really are the spirit of the Evidence Act.
What did you learn from those assessments about each of those, I imagine silos is a fair word to describe them, that will help you break those silos and make data flow more freely across the department from bureau to bureau?
Well, breaking silos is part of the Executive Order 14243 President Trump signed recently, which is trying to break down data silos within the bureaus. So we do have data silos, as everybody has, because there are different mission sets within the bureaus. Everybody has the Treasury mission, but there's also missions related to what Bureau of Engraving and Printing is doing, what the IRS is doing, what Mint is doing, Bureau of the Fiscal Service. So trying to break down those silos. What we learned from our data maturity assessment is there are lots of different systems out there. Many of them are not connected, and many of them don't need to be connected, but we're really getting a sense of really where we should think about connecting data sets. And looking at data sharing as well, that's another big effort. Looking at data sharing and how we can connect data elements throughout the department to create that common story across the bureaus.
As you're doing that assessment, how much of what you see that will help you connect that data better has to do with the data itself, standards and so on? How much of it's infrastructure, with the way the infrastructure of the bureaus may be set up to communicate with each other, that kind of thing?
Well, it's both. You've got a very vast amount of highly varied data. And then we have lots of systems that don't speak. And so we're looking at doing things like APIs, application programming interfaces, to really better connect the data sets and make them more efficient. So looking at that, and as well as leveraging artificial intelligence across the department at different levels, is something that we're looking at, piloting some of those efforts as well to better connect the data sets. Some of our larger agencies, like the IRS, bureaus, the IRS, they've got a vast amount of data, and we talk about big data, big data, big data. Really, it's about what do we do with the data is now becoming really the main focus.
You told me before we went on the air about 3 elements of data that are important to you: data standards, metadata, data quality frameworks. What are those? How are they relevant to your modernization effort?
Well, data quality is important. If you don't have good data quality, none of it really matters. So data quality is really one of the most important elements of that. So we look at multiple data sets, triangulate data sets to see if we come up with the same answer when we have the same question. And when you don't, there could be an issue. It could be an issue of data quality, it might be an issue of how you query the data sets, might be an issue of how you define terms, your assumptions. So looking at that. And the metadata is very important with our data sharing. We have a lot of agreements that are being shared across the department. And the metadata will help us understand sort of the nature of some of those sharing agreements. What are in those agreements? What's the story behind the totality of those agreements? So the metadata, data about data, so to speak, is really what we're looking for to kind of get a better understanding of what we really have.
And I imagine that also helps the individual bureaus understand what the other bureaus have to determine what might help them that maybe they didn't know existed until now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, within Treasury, we have, each bureau has its own chief data officer. And then we have the chief data officer at where I am. So there's a lot of ways we can draw together and better understand who's doing what. So we've created an enterprise data council of all the CDOs. So we meet regularly to see, hey, what are you doing? And how can we better interact and better connect our data sets and better really learn from each other what works and what doesn't work.
Have you started to see fruits from those council meetings already?
Yes. People, they know each other much better. They know who's doing what, and they get a better sense of how the data that they're using, maybe we could learn from others about how to analyze data, particularly in things like using AI. There's different levels of interest there and different levels of applicability. And so getting a sense of who's doing what really is going to help us leverage that tool more in an enterprise way.
How are you looking at AI, and how are you encouraging the CDOs, the bureaus, to look at AI as a tool to solve a problem rather than as a shiny thing that would be cool to implement, may not necessarily be the solution to the problem?
Yeah, the shiny object is an issue, and I think one of the challenges is what do we do with the information? So one of the problems with AI, or challenges really with AI, is it's so far ahead of us on a daily basis. I mean, we're sitting here talking, we're already behind in some ways in where AI has moved. So we're really trying to develop use cases, how we can actually use it and put guardrails around it. We do want to use it. Of course, we're going to be cautious about how it's being used, but there are a lot of different ways that we can do, and lots of types of analyses you can do to better understand how we can really implement some policies to affect the Treasury work. So, for example, looking at things like the bond markets, and that's very complicated, a lot of moving parts with interest rates going up and down. How do you predict that? So many moving parts with that. Using AI to help us with things like creating what they call random forests, which is bringing together lots of decision trees to answer how all those variables interact, is a level of insight we don't really have without those kinds of tools. So use cases is really a key piece of it.
In modernization, it's easy to assume that the IT people are really important partners to you. I imagine they're not the only ones. Who are the other folks that you're working very closely with on your modernization efforts?
Well, yeah, the IT people are critical. Nothing happens without the IT folks. But also data users, data stewards. People are actually going to use the information, how they inform leadership with the information. So having a lot of data is not really good enough. We have to tell a story. So when we present dashboards and data to leadership, it's not just here's what we found. We need to also include the so what and the now what. What do we expect leaders to do with this information? How is their value add? So incorporating data stewards and how they actually create, manage, and send data to senior leaders, that's really, they're really critical partners in all this.
That's not the first time I've heard people say we sometimes might lose track of the reason we're doing all of this. It's not to have these tools in place. It's to help those data stewards actually do their jobs better, be able to deliver better whatever the mission is of the agency at hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, senior leaders, the secretary is expecting folks to bring to him data and analysis. He's not really sitting there necessarily, running spreadsheets himself in the way that we would as data stewards. So he really expects his folks to bring to him products that are meaningful and meet the mission. So better training. This is why we have data literacy, a big campaign on that, to really help folks better manage and use data.
How do you measure these campaigns to determine whether you're getting the results from them that you want?
Well, we ask folks after action, hey, surveys essentially, did you learn anything? What did you learn? And how are you going to use this for your work? And then go back to them later, months later, and say, well, did you use any of these tools in your work? It's really not just about a nice to have. It's really about, over time, are you actually using these tools? Are you elevating your analysis over time? Not just did you learn something in that one session. So we are getting a lot of feedback that people are using tools as they move through their work. So that's really going to be helpful for us to continue to expand the data literacy campaign.
David, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
You can read more about the Treasury Department's data efforts on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the modernization mission to fulfill the president's management agenda. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. We'll be right back.
Innovation doesn't wait, and neither do we. At Maximus, we solve problems, streamlining operations, delivering solutions at speed and scale that drive measurable results. From strategy to execution, we simplify complexity, building trust through expertise and innovative technology. Every service, every time. Efficient government delivered. We don't follow innovation. We drive it. Maximus.
Welcome back. One of the priorities in the new president's management agenda that's out from OMB is to, quote, cease payments to fraudsters and eliminate waste. Financial management leaders across government tell me they're looking at ways they can use technology to do that. Kerry Canfield's Vice President of Product Strategy and Market Engagement at CGI Federal. Kerry, welcome. Thanks for joining me. How have you seen agencies that are modernizing financial management systems use that as an opportunity to really amp up their waste, fraud, and abuse efforts?
Yeah, so the President's executive order in March 2025 entitled Protecting America's Bank Account from Fraud, Waste, and Abuse put financial management systems consolidation squarely in the middle of payment integrity. And the intersections across the different domain areas is so key. So budget talks to HR talks to finance, procurement talks to finance. So the pre-built integrations that Treasury has established, including the do not pay integrations, is a key tool for agencies to use to ferret out fraud, waste, and abuse. But there are others. Agencies right now are piloting with artificial intelligence tools and techniques, ways to use commercial data sets to validate before I make the procurement or before I make the payment, the payee or the awardee is who they say they are, and using AI to ferret out various fraud schemes and present back to the agency a risk profile before the payment goes out the door.
Is that maybe the biggest opportunity that agencies have with this new technology, is being able to assess the risk that they have to prevent pay and chase, is what people have talked about improper payments for years?
Yeah, so you want to start where your internal controls are the strongest, and payment integrity is an area where the internal controls processes are strong. Pilot these tools and see what makes sense for your organization. You may want to assess programs at different levels of risk profiles, right? It makes sense where you have the highest risk is where you want to put your time and attention.
And you anticipated my next question, which is, would you advise an agency to start a pilot program on a high-risk program or a low-risk program to get what kind of a sense these tools are going to yield?
Yeah, pilot something first.
Anything.
Make sure we find that there is fraud or there is waste, and you can identify some risk profile before you roll it out in full implementation.
What's the best way to assess these programs and maybe kind of put them on some kind of a matrix to determine which ones you want to try to attack first?
So the agencies are registering their programs with OMB and with Treasury right now and undergoing that process right now.
Are there common threads in what agencies see when they do these assessments for risk?
There are, and they have very robust risk management frameworks in place to assess the risk across the program inventory.
Does the risk management framework for waste, fraud, and abuse operate the same? Does one construct it in the same way that one does a more enterprise risk management framework?
They do. Yeah, it is very similar in terms of other risk profiles.
What do you advise agencies to do to measure these modernization efforts as they're undertaking them, to make sure that they stay on track, not just from a technology perspective, but also from a mission delivery perspective?
So at first, as a practical step, I would start with those systems that have been validated to have the pre-built integrations amongst the data exchange, as I mentioned. In various marketplaces, such as the FMQ SMO marketplace, systems and vendors have already been evaluated in order to assess the controls across the domains. So start there. And then pilot innovations where it makes sense. The thing we're seeing clients do with their fraud, waste, and abuse tools is they're implementing it within their own security domain. so that they don't have to share it across agencies.
What's the benefit to that, or what's the potential risk if they did have to share across agencies?
If they have to share across agencies, they have to do the Computer Matching Act and the Privacy Act considerations and open up things in their firewalls to make sure that they can share the data across the profiles.
What will ultimately facilitate that? Is there a point where that will become necessary because of something that OMB or an executive order has told them they have to do? Is that something that you don't anticipate being an issue for a while ago?
Treasury is certainly putting time and attention towards that. The President's executive orders talk about data sharing, and a lot of yeoman's efforts have been made in order to share data across agencies. But right now we're asking agencies to pilot within their own security domain and really find out and validate where the risk profiles are.
We have about 30 seconds left. What would you watch as we move forward and agencies are trying these pilots, looking at the results and figuring out where to go next?
So continuous modernization is key, right? We have to work with OMB and with Congress to ensure that budget is available for continuous modernization. It's not only about squaring off the security or the cybersecurity posture of the agency where they have to do adaptive maintenance, but it's also the need to bring new capabilities in, either because of compliance mandates or because of the AI technology and the evolution that's available to the users.
Great to have you here, Kerry. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much.
You can read more about financial management system modernization on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the Navy's all in on autonomy. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
Governance, right? If you don't have strong governance of access to data, where the data sits and is stored, it's going to be really interesting because you're going to have someone doing it a little bit differently, and that difference, even though it might be slight, is where bad actors and ransomware can sort of get in. And so updating the HIPAA regulations, understanding how providers will be incentivized to adopt cybersecurity, deploy AI, et cetera, will be something super relevant and super important as we go on this modernization journey.
Welcome back. 2026 could be a blockbuster year for autonomous systems in the Navy. According to Captain Garrett Miller, Commodore of the Navy's Surface Development Group 1, the service went from 4 small UAVs at the beginning of 2025 to hundreds now. Captain Sarah Rice, U.S. Navy, is Executive Officer of the Naval Research Laboratory. Captain, welcome. It's great to have you on the program. How's the work that you're doing at NRL connect with what the rest of the service is doing on UAVs?
Absolutely. We at the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory are spearheading really the science and the research that goes into delivering that capability to all of our fleet, especially the autonomous and unmanned systems.
Where do you see the most potential for impact in UAVs across the service?
I think the potential for artificial intelligence and autonomy is everywhere. And really the most important thing that we can do is deliver autonomy and AI, not just as a tool for the warfighter, but as a real partner to aid in decision making and information superiority, to make sure that the humans really have the information that they need to make the decisions that they need at speed, which is the hardest thing. So making the humans do what only a human can do and letting AI and autonomy and robotics do what the easy stuff is.
I note that you connect autonomy and AI, but they're not necessarily the same thing. What's that relationship look like as each of those technologies evolves?
They're not necessarily the same thing, that's correct. But they do need to inform each other. We can be autonomous, but it will be able to only do limited things. When we have artificial intelligence built in, they will be able to do more. We won't have someone necessarily driving them and telling it what to do. Also, we can do things that like NRL has developed where that autonomous system can learn to do more things and better things in that environment without us having to tell it what to do, and to be really learning as it's doing those things, which is very exciting.
You anticipated my next question, Captain, which is what have you seen from an evolution perspective? What can you do now that you weren't able to do fairly recently? And where do you see this technology going that things you'll be able to do in the near future that you can't right now?
Well, what is really exciting about this technology is being able to put it in places where the operating environment is very difficult. For example, on the Astrobe program in space, we recently tested a reinforcement algorithm in the International Space Station where a robot was learning by a reinforcement method. It was very exciting to be able to do that. It also was something that they were able to develop in 3 months instead of a notional 6 or an even 9 months timeline. And it worked the first time that it was up there, so we're very excited because space is a hard environment to operate in, and we saw that successful right off the bat. So we know what we can use this type of technology to operate in other contested or otherwise difficult environments.
So you've hit on 2 of the domains, sea and space. I imagine you're doing work in these areas in the other domains as well.
Absolutely. And what we've discovered is that domain matters, and we really need to bake it in from the beginning. We don't just create an algorithm and then put it in the domain as an afterthought. We really need to build in the domain from the beginning, which is where the body of research scientists that we have at NRL is very important for the development of these for those applications, because we have people that understand the physics, the challenges of working in that transition area between air and sea, that understand those places where it's operationally hard to work, where we can deliver those capabilities.
Yeah, you call that, I read, domain-centric AI, and it sounds like the principle behind that is you do have to take a different approach for each of those domains. What does that mean, though, as you just mentioned a moment ago, where you have a project, a program, whatever, that operates in a cross-domain function?
Absolutely. It's one of those things where something I think that the Navy has always done, and U.S. Naval Research Laboratory, as the Navy's corporate lab, has always done. We've known that operating undersea is different than operating in the air or even at that transition layer. And when we have that fundamental understanding of the science of those operating environments, we can then, as we have done with a lot of technologies, better understand those applications of where those technologies can go. And especially with AI, we can learn from them. We can, by focusing on the needs of those, the operators that are out there and how we can give them that advantage, we can make sure that they're ready to transition the technology. So we bridge that gap from technical ideas to applications in the field.
Who are some of your closest partners as you're developing this technology and studying it?
I would say industry and academia in general, and they are necessarily our close partners because we can come up with great ideas, but we need industry and academia to help us with that. Not only just coming up with the ideas where academia comes in, but also making sure that we can scale those ideas, making it producible, giving it the transition path that we know that industry can help us with as we deliver these capabilities to the warfighters.
Whether it's something that you see or develop in-house or something that industry brings to you, how do you analyze something to determine that it's something that you want to spend time on, that you want to spend money on, to be able to kind of tease it out and see if it's something that's going to be workable for the warfighter?
That's a great question, because there's also not just one answer there. We have to do a lot of different, we have a lot of discussion about it, right? And there's a lot of necessarily back and forth, where we have kind of shark tanks with our basic research to say like, hey, we think it's applicable here. Sometimes there's ideas that we think are applicable one place, but then we use them for something completely different. Those are kind of the best ones that are the most fun, that take those fun curves, because it's not a linear path from discovery and science to application. We need to keep competing those ideas, keep coming up with different things, keep analyzing them and saying, is this getting where it needs us to go, or should we reevaluate, either take that somewhere else, put it on the back burner and be able to bring it up again when something else changes. There's a lot that goes into it.
How do you determine what those changes are that inform the direction that you want to go, or the types of technologies you want to focus on, or the types of solutions that you want to focus on?
Oh, absolutely. We also listen to the warfighter, and we listen to academia, and we listen to those folks who are generating those needs for the warfighter, because the individual warfighters may not have the full perspective. They have a great perspective, but it's not always the big one, or the full picture. And sometimes it's even best to get out there and do those little things. We like to use the Henry Ford quote that is, if Henry Ford had asked what the consumer wanted, they would have said a faster horse. We're here to bring them those prototypes of those cars to see what kind of car that they would want to drive.
What connection do you keep with the warfighter, with the end user of whatever you're developing, to make sure that it's doing what they need it to, and that you're taking it in a direction that's helpful to them, that gives them an internal combustion engine instead of a buggy whip?
As a naval research enterprise, we have science leaders all across the globe embedded in our staff fleets from the Navy perspective. We do a lot of collaboration, a lot of outreach to academia. We're at the conferences. They're coming to us. We're talking all of the time and keeping that communication going so that we're getting good ideas both from the warfighter and from industry and academia who want to solve these hard problems. We have about a minute left. How does your previous experience operationally inform the way that you're approaching autonomy and AI at the NRL? I think that's a great question because I've learned what I love about the Navy is that it's hard and that we are always learning. The Navy operates in a challenging environment. We operate where a lot of folks don't go. And there's a lot of learning behind it. And there's also a lot of work that happens, especially when a ship goes underway. That ship may have 300 people on it, but 300,000 have worked to get that ship underway and make it capable of what it's doing. So that's what I'm hoping to bring to my experience, is make sure we keep communicating that both to the warfighter and to the folks working on that ship to know that that partnership exists. Captain, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for being here today. Thank you. You can read more about NRL's work on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in a moment.
In government, there's also a lot of funding that's been pointed in that direction. And so sort of getting rid of this artificial segmentation that exists in the minds of government employees is critical to moving this industry forward in a way that it's going to allow us to adapt and continue to grow.
Just saying we can access that and we have that information, but being able to tell a story with that and develop programs around that, it's more important than ever that we're treating everything that you have, whether it be data or records or paper in boxes like Alec was saying, it's all the same. It needs to be treated under a strong program that really enforces all the frameworks and things that we've been talking about for years.
Training at an agency is completely different for the different groups, but if all the information is now governed together, then ARMA and others can do the training to help those people excel at their jobs, and again, do it faster and more efficient. And then the cloud and AI is going to help to be the force multiplier to really expand that.
Welcome back. The budget deal Congress is working on now includes a new infusion of money for the Technology Modernization Fund. Two former federal CIOs, Suzette Kent and Tony Scott, are my guests for a special FedGov Today podcast this week. They'll tell you what they see in the future of the TMF and how agencies can get the most out of TMF awards in the AI era. You get the FedGov Today podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the FedGov Today YouTube channel, and always on demand at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today TV is back next Sunday morning at 10:30 with Patrick Newbold, the CIO at Health and Human Services. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.